I'm a big advocate for reality, hence the title of this video, Say No to Pie in the Sky. Now I realize I have many non-native speakers as subs, so let me take the time to explain what pie in the sky is. Now let's read off the dictionary definition. Informal, used to describe or refer to something that is pleasant to contemplate, but is very unlikely to be realized. Synonyms: false hope, illusion, delusion, unrealizable dream, fantasy, pipe dream, daydream, reverie, mirage, castle in the air, castle in Spain. Quote, their dreams of travel are pie in the sky, end quote. So this video is very much about reality. Now, there are three things I'm going to talk about specifically, but they all tie into the same thing. And ultimately, they all tie into the disavowal of reality. The desire for things that are not only unlikely to be realized, but probably impossible. But before I proceed to that, I want to first explain my position on the notion of egalitarianism. Now, egalitarianism has, of course, been talked about quite a bit in MGTOW circles, outside of MGTOW circles, by the feminist first responders as well. And the traditional rebuttal to the difference between unequal opportunities and unequal outcomes is, well, egalitarianism is about opportunity, not outcome, which is to say, the outcome is irrelevant. What's really important is that everyone has the opportunity. But social justice warriors, of course, leftists, of those of their ilk, are far too focused on the outcome, and they're conflating the two. Well, I'm here to say that neither is valid. Both are bunk, frankly speaking. In the reality we live in, there is neither equal opportunity nor equal outcome. They're both bullshit. Everybody in life starts from a different stance, a different position, a different set of genetics, different socioeconomic circumstances, different geographical locations, and that alone can pose to be a problem. So the idea that there can be, realistically speaking, anything such as equal opportunity, well, that's belied by that. In addition, all of these circumstances lead to different outcomes. They're intimately connected. Now, some people will chime in and then say, well, what equal opportunity really means equal opportunity before the law. But the reality is we all have hidden autopilot prejudice. That's true, absolutely. The way we react to facial features, the way we react to asymmetrical faces, the inherent racism we almost to a man or to a woman have. These are all things, and I will be listing all this in the low bar as usual, these are all things that we have that we really can't control for. So you might have two candidates for a job. Let's say you run a company or you're the hiring officer. One is far more qualified, seems much more competent. The other guy has much more symmetrical facial features and a better smile. You might actually weigh that. You can't. Very few people would objectively look at this. They might actually, and the other guy is less than average looks. Well, what do you do in that case? Well, ideally, you have an equal opportunity, but the equal opportunity isn't there. One of them has better facial genetics. The other might have a better track record, maybe even a better mind, a better brain, but our inherent biases might affect that. Our inherent biases might affect the opportunity and thus ultimately the outcome. But that's life. So I just wanted to get that out of the way in the beginning. There's no such thing as equal opportunity and no such thing as equal outcome. And then you might think, well, Stardust, what do we do then? What do we do? We don't do anything. My primary concern, and this has been echoed in previous videos, older videos of mine, such as Escape Velocity, which many regard as a classic, exceptionally long video, who knows if I'll ever do a video like that again, is efficient outcomes. I don't like really talk about opportunities, because opportunities are just, once again, they're mitigated by so many different factors, and you can't really correct for them. You cannot create a paradise on earth. Sometimes I refer to this as marshmallow utopianism, the pie in the sky idea. It's not realizable. But what I'm interested in is efficient outcomes. What is the best for human civilization? Now, some of the things I'm going to have to say later on in this video are going to ruffle lots of people's feathers. Certainly, they will ruffle the feathers of leftists or social justice warriors, but also so-called race realists who I don't really think are realistic about race. Whilst observing racial differences, they show particular allegiance to their own race, more than anyone else. Now, my position on this is, once again, efficient outcomes. If there's one particular race or ethnic group, and we'll get to that in a bit, that outperforms another, I don't give a shit. I'm not interested in racial purity. I'm interested in efficiency. And I ultimately think that's the best model for all of society. So I'm going to piss everyone off, presumably. Or I won't, in the sense that people will agree with me. So I wanted to get that out of the way. There is no such thing as equal opportunity, no such thing as equal outcome. It's all bullshit, and we cannot amend reality to arrive at that point. So what should we focus on? We should focus on efficient outcomes. Hiring, engaging with the best people possible in whatever respective field we're talking about. And with that said, let's move on to the 3 articles of insanity, or topics of insanity, that are the meat of this discussion. Now, a certain powerful CEO of a certain exceptionally powerful company, the format of which I'm using right now, has gone on record several times as insisting that paid maternity leave is good for business, number one, and that the extension of paid maternity leave from 12 weeks to 18 weeks is even better for business. Now, I've sifted through many articles, and I've actually tried to find real data. I'm not an economist, I'm not a mathematician, but I can do basic numeracy and arithmetic, the numbers to back this up. All the articles I've seen have been anecdotal and essentially amount to sloganeering. So, and there are, once again, links in the low bar as usual to everything I'm talking about. Paid maternity leave is good for business. This is the claim she makes in the Wall Street Journal. Her claim, and this is the good for business part, pay attention. When we increased paid leave at Google to 18 weeks, the rate at which new mothers left fell by 50%. That's really interesting. So you gave them 6 more weeks of paid vacation, and they decided, 50% of them decided to stay on with the job. Well, where does that come from? I can't imagine that. Why would they decide to stay at a job that gives them 18 weeks paid vacation? For a private decision, for a lifestyle choice. And we'll get into that in a bit. Can't imagine it. I mean, why would they? In some of the other articles referencing this, they talk of, greater productivity. And after they return from their 18-month paid vacation to bond with their sucklings, they're more motivated to work. Okay. There are a number of elements here at play. All of this is pie in the sky. Once again, no numbers are cited. When they talk about more productive, it's just an airy effete slogan, essentially. There's no substance to it. And I'll tell you why. You don't need to be an economist or a mathematician or both to figure out why this is bullshit. In terms of productivity, and let's be honest, companies exist to make profit. In terms of productivity, if you give somebody 18 weeks of paid vacation, then claim subsequently that they're more productive workers, then to my mind, that means that their work is yielding more profit than what was lost during their 18 weeks of paid maternity leave or 18 weeks of paid vacation where there was no productivity for the company whatsoever. And now we have to imagine, how likely is that? How likely is a worker coming back from 18 weeks of paid vacation going to be so productive? He might be more, or she might be more productive. I don't doubt that. Sometimes rest and relaxation really is beneficial. In fact, there have been studies to show that some relaxation and vacation is necessary to optimize production. But 18 weeks? You would have to literally have an output during working presumably far more than normal hours, so I don't know, overtime, twice as much, for months, if not years, because you're not productive at all in any capacity for the respective company, in this case, Google. So you come back from your 18 weeks of paid vacation, and somehow you're more productive, and it's good for business. If the general definition of good for business is maximizing profit, and I think we can all agree that's the general definition, it's not defined here in any of these articles, then I think we can also agree that that must be some one hell of a level of productivity these employees are exhibiting after 18 weeks of paid vacation. And it would have to necessarily make up for and exceed the amount that was lost in profit for paying for people's lifestyle choices. Notice how I say lifestyle choice. Having sex, which then leads to pregnancy, that's a lifestyle choice. That's not a right, although, of course, social justice warriors and their ilk would claim that's a right, that it's a right to have children, a right to be pregnant, a right to have sex, and you should be paid to have sex and paid to have children. Well, that's a really interesting concept, I think. So we've already dispensed with this notion that it's good for business. Objectively, it's not, unless the employee returning works, I don't know, quadruple the hours and produces so much more, which we all know is not highly unlikely, not true. But the real issue here is the notion that this should just be par for the course. Now, I have considered one argument, and this was my own argument in playing devil's advocate with myself on this topic, namely that, well, every industrialized nation on the planet faces at this moment in time a so-called demographic crisis, right? The demographic decline, as it's sometimes referred to. Women, of course, could then make the argument, and it would be a bad one, I'll explain why. Well, we need to replenish our population numbers, hence it's a right, or something really wishy-washy along those lines. Now, there might be some truth that population and reproduction is below replenishment numbers. In fact, that basically most economists and population experts agree in places, especially like Japan and South Korea, where it's most extreme, and Germany, the most extreme country in the world in this regard, lowest population, lowest birth rates. But since when is the duty or the obligation of a private company to essentially endorse a social policy? Now, when you have the intermingling and mixing of big business and government, well, it becomes an entirely different story. But for someone who's so allegedly so bright and so talented as the CEO of YouTube, making airy, effete, vacuous claims about greater productivity and things being quote-unquote good for business that aren't backed up by any data I can see, that's bad for business because, well, the person isn't really lying, but they're obfuscating in this case. Now, we all know why women love 18 weeks of paid vacation. Who wouldn't love that? Imagine you had some fantastic job where you're probably only working, 30 hours a week to begin with, and they say, well, you know what, we have this great new plan. We're paying you 18 weeks of continuous vacation, and on top of that, you can do whatever you want. Hey, you could say, well, I really want to study the creation kit for Skyrim so I can become a master mod maker. I'm going to use those 4 months to do that. Hey, Google, why don't you pay me for that? Hey, Company X, why don't you pay? Oh, sure, of course. And when you come back, you'll be that much more productive, right? So this is bullshit. This is pie in the sky. But this is, of course, part and parcel of the mentality that we're facing in this day and age. Things that are just misaligned with reality. No one in his right mind, I would even argue the most delusional person on the left, would claim that it's objectively more productive for a company to pay its employee to do nothing for the company for 18 weeks, and then out of that emerges greater productivity. It's insane. Women like it because it gives them, what they always want: freebies and boni or bonuses that they can't get otherwise. In fact, I've seen articles referencing states for women that they can go to in order to reap maximum benefit in terms of paid maternity leave, as if having children were some sort of right guaranteed to you and should be paid for by private companies. But this is the new mandate. So that's one piece of insanity and madness that I'm addressing here, and I think I've addressed that sufficiently. It's objectively not more productive. Like I said, you would need to work years and years and years to make up, probably at the very least a year or two, to make up for the loss of productivity and profit for the company in paying you to mod Skyrim or pop out kids when you're not actually doing anything for the company. Moving on. The next topic is related to race and racial relations and affirmative action and university and education, some of our favorite subjects. And in recent years, there has been a new bias. Yeah, but it's not the bias you think. Now, many people argue, and I think there's strong evidence to support this, that the great minority success story in the United States is the Asian American community, whatever that even means, since there's so many different kinds of Asians. What most people are referring to are East Asians because they tend to display the highest IQs of the Asian population. They're not referring to Southeast Asians, so on and so forth. But I'll refer to them as Asians for the time being. And what's been going on, particularly in the Ivy League University, is that Asians who are more qualified than others are being denied an opportunity to attend these universities, even when they do better than other people, when they do better than white people, when they do better than black people or anyone else. So let's listen for now to the rather tragic story of one Michael Wang. Now, Wang obviously is a Chinese surname, so he's obviously of Chinese ethnic origin. So let's listen a bit to his story. This is from The Economist, and of course, as always, links in the low bar. Michael Wang, or Wang as you might say in English, a young Californian, came second in his class of 1,002 students. His ACT score was 36, the maximum possible. He sang at Barack Obama's inauguration. He got third place in a national piano contest. He was in the top 150 of national maths competition. He was in several national debating competition finals. But when it came to his university application, he faced a serious disappointment for the first time in his glittering career. He was rejected by 6 of the 7 Ivy League colleges to which he applied. Quote, "I saw people less qualified than me get better offers," says Mr. Wang. "At first, I was just angry. Then I decided to turn that anger to productive use." He wrote to the universities concerned, and I asked, "What more could I have done to get in your college? Was it based on race? Or what was it based on? I don't know." He got vague responses, or none. So he complained to the Department of Education. Nothing came of it. The department said they needed a smoking gun, end quote. And it continues. And this was this previous year, mind you. In May this year, that is 2015, Mr. Wang joined a group of 64 Asian American organizations that made a joint complaint to the Department of Education against Harvard, alleging racial discrimination. That follows a lawsuit filed last year against Harvard and the University of North Carolina by a group of Asian American students making similar charges. The department rejected the claim in July, but the other 2 complaints have since been filed by Asian Americans, one against Harvard and one against 9 other universities. So, continuing, on October 3rd, 1965, President Lyndon Johnson signed the Immigration and Nationality Act into law, sweeping away a system that favored white Europeans over other races. One of its main consequences was the beginning of mass immigration to America from Asia. By most indicators, these incomers have done better than any other ethnic minority group. Indeed, they have long been described as, quote-unquote, the model minority, prosperous, well-educated, and quiescent. But there are problems, as a result of which they are becoming somewhat less quiescent than they once were. And it goes on and on and on. If you scroll down below, it cites statistics. It is their educational outperformance that is most remarkable. 49% of Asian Americans have a bachelor's degree compared with 28% of the general population, whereas Asian Americans make up 5.6% of the population in the United States. And throughout this, referring to Asian Americans, they really do mean East Asians, I think, or those of those of Chinese ethnic heritage or Korean or Japanese. And it goes on and on. On average, East Asians, or Asians, if you will, score higher, 100 points, 150 points higher than the white average, and well over 400 points higher than the black average. Now, I'm going to get back to this, but let's first talk about race and ethnicity in the NBA. So let's just read off the latest stats here. The composition of race and ethnicity in the National Basketball Association has changed throughout the league's history. The first non-white player entered the league in 1947. According to racial equality activist Richard Lapchick, the NBA in 2015 was composed of 74.4% black players, 23.3% white players, 1.8% Latinos, and 0.2% Asian. The league has the highest percentage of black players of any major professional sports league in the United States and Canada. So basically 75% black. I mean, just a few decimal points off of that. This doesn't seem to be a problem. Where are all the activists complaining about this? Now, as I stated at the beginning of this video, I have absolutely no problem with this. This seems to be the efficient model. On average, blacks, and particularly those of West African heritage, have certain anatomical features, certain genetic features that allow for more explosive power, the kinds of things that are an asset in the NBA. So I have no problem that blacks make up 75% of the NBA. Absolutely no problem. If blacks made up 90% of the NBA, and obviously that's not very likely because for the past few years this number has been relatively stable, I wouldn't have a problem with that. Why? Because I would know that the best players are there doing the best possible job. Now let's turn the tables here. Education is a little bit different. It's not identical. But let's think of a hypothetical situation here. What if we had the exact opposite, more or less? What if we said 75% of university participants and graduates were Asian, specifically East Asian, something like 23.3% were white, and the rest were a mixture of black and Latino and Native American or whatever. Now, many people would have an issue with this, including white nationalists. I wouldn't. The point I'm trying to make here is I don't really give a crap about the ethnic composition of anything. I'm not pro-diversity. I'm not against it. But I think competence should always outweigh diversity. Now, how this particular story came up was I was having a conversation the other week with an internet acquaintance who was telling me about a local tech high school which had something around a 70% Asian American population attending it. And apparently, some people had their feathers ruffled by this, and they were thinking, we need to diversify this school. Goddamn chinks and gooks and kooks, too many of those, right? So anyway, I guess they're going to be moving forward with plans to, quote-unquote, diversify that tech high school. See how that goes. Which then led me to do some research on this interesting phenomenon, which has really only occurred probably in the last decade or so and has become more and more prominent. The other interesting thing about this phenomenon is that as an Asian American, you are held to quite literally a different standard than people of other ethnic backgrounds. So what do I mean by that? So when you're an Asian, let's say you have Korean heritage and you apply to some top university, it's not enough to do better than, I don't know, 89% of the population. You need to do 80% or 90% better than the Asian population. So the other people from other ethnic backgrounds, blacks, whites, Latinos, then have an advantage over you. So if you only do, let's say, I'll just make up some tests. We'll call it Test Y. And Test Y is graded on a score of 0 or 100 to 1,000. And the average white score is, I don't know, maybe 600. And the average Asian score is 750. Well, you need to do significantly better than 750. You might be competing against a white guy who has a 600 and you get a 750 or a 760 on Test Y, but that's not good enough. You need to get a 950 because that needs to be significantly above the Asian average. And why do they do this? Of course, it is, well, basically reverse discrimination. That's what affirmative action is. You need to outcompete the other Asians, who in general are outcompeting every other ethnic minority and basically every other ethnicity in the context of the United States. Now, once again, if 90% of the university population in the United States were composed only of Asian Americans, specifically East Asian Americans of Korean, Japanese, Chinese descent, I wouldn't give a shit because they would be there because they're, frankly speaking, better at academic performance than other ethnicities. They, on average, test higher than the average white IQ, and they test significantly higher than the average black IQ. And this is reflected in SAT scores and other things as well. I'm interested in maximum efficiency. I think as a society, as a civilization, we should be as well. I'm not interested in racial purity, which is why I don't care that the NBA is filled to the brim 75% of black people. They're clearly a lot better at that job. Now, it's funny that in the context of the NBA, or any other sport where there's a majority of black people, nobody comes in and says, you know what, we need stocky East Asians to play this, because that, well, number one, that wouldn't be very entertaining, and they wouldn't be very good at it either. People wouldn't pay for tickets. But when it comes to the realm of education, when it comes to the mind, we start talking about, I don't know, we sort of get lost in our political correctness. We need to give everyone an opportunity, right? Wrong. Competence is important. Diversity is not. I'm not against diversity. If the colors of the Rainbow League somehow led to more efficient and greater outcomes in productivity and invention, in thought and writing and mathematics and so on and so forth, I would be completely for that. But I wouldn't be for that because the colors of the rainbow themselves were the form. I would be for that because of the outcomes and basically whatever led to those outcomes. In the case of this bias that's being projected towards Asian Americans in the university system in the United States, and I suspect in Canada as well, as this only refers to the United States, these articles, I don't care how monolithic the university population might be, and I don't think we really should be concerned, because frankly speaking, if Asian Americans are outcompeting other ethnicities, white, black, Latino, whatever, I don't know, why shouldn't they get the spots? I mean, one thing we need to always remind ourselves is that life isn't fair. And going back to the beginning of the video, this whole egalitarian bullshit about, equal opportunities and outcomes, no such thing exists, right? We've all been disadvantaged in our lives in some way, some more than others. Some have had more socioeconomic access and opportunities. Others have been endowed with greater intelligence. Others have been endowed with greater beauty and athleticism. Some people combine all these things. There is no fairness in life. And it's so strange. It's one of the strangest things I've noticed, not just in American politics, but really across the Western Hemisphere, as it were. And this would include Oceania, Australia and New Zealand as well, is that one of those cardinal rules in life that I think everyone can profit from not only learning, because it's pretty obvious, but absorbing and internalizing. Remember the difference between recognition and internalization, is that life isn't fair. There's no institution in the world that can create fairness out of the unfairness of life. We've all had advantages and disadvantages, some more than others. But if we're interested in a productive society, a competitive one that pushes the envelope, we can't really be worried about fairness. So if Mr. Kim happens to be better, maybe not the exceptional Asian, but better than 90% of the blacks and the whites, why shouldn't he get a spot ahead of the University of Pennsylvania or Columbia or whatever? It's absolutely ridiculous. We do not need diversity or more diversity or less. What we need is competence. And if that competence is represented by a monolithic ethnic group, or for that matter, sex, I mean, for example, we know that on average men are just much more adept at technical activities. And for example, this totally hypothetical situation, let's talk about Caltech, one of the elite universities of the world, certainly one of the most elite tech universities of the world. What if Caltech, if it got rid of all these weird biases and affirmative action, ended up with, I don't know, something like 90% males, 80% of them were Asian, the rest of them were kind of a mixture, maybe 5% white, and the rest were just a mixture, and they had 10% females. Now, social justice warriors would cry out in alarm and be, oh, I can't believe this. They would freak out, and other people would too. But for me, that would just be reflective of essentially, life market competition, people doing what they can and the best that they can. And of course, that would lead to better outcomes in the long run, outcomes that would benefit society on the whole and just about, well, not just the individuals, but everyone. I don't really understand the notion that we need to kowtow to diversity. In the same sense, this is once again not, and this is why white nationalists and their ilk get angry. I'm not interested in racial purity. Like I said, if 90% of American universities turned out to be Asian American, I wouldn't care. If they're outperforming white people, that's fine. If they're outperforming purple people, that's fine. I don't really care. Now, I'm not someone who thinks this is just cultural. There do seem to be indications, I've talked about this in the past, there are clear indications that the races are different, rather. And there are reasons, for example, why the NBA is dominated by blacks and why East Asians in particular outperform other ethnic minorities, and indeed Caucasian people on average. Now, does that make me a racist? I don't really know. I don't really care. I'm not interested in racial purity. Outcomes are the most important thing. And this is terrible because these people, this guy like, Michael Wang, the young Californian who did as well as he did, got rejected by 6 elite Ivy League universities because he happened to be Chinese, of Chinese ethnicity. Meanwhile, some white or black kid got ahead of him, maybe a black, white, or black female who did significantly worse on various tests and had a lot less potential. That's bad, because that person almost certainly is going to bring a lot less to the fore in the future for himself or herself as an individual and for the rest of society. But unfortunately, we've gotten to the point in Western society where diversity in and of itself is supposed to be a good thing. We just need this is the same thing that the CEO of YouTube says. Women in tech make tech more diverse, and that's a good thing. That is a slogan that has no proof behind it. I've never seen a shred of evidence that diversity in and of itself is a good thing. Now, I'd love to see studies where it shows you get better results, better test results, better economic results merely by championing diversity. Now, of course, in the system I propose, it's unfortunate. A lot of people who are less qualified, less capable would be left behind, and maybe they'd have to do other stuff. But that's life. Once again, one thing we've all forgotten, or many of us at least, particularly in this young generation, is that life isn't fair. Now, some people would say, well, I've been privileged because, I come from a middle-class socioeconomic background. I have a decent level of intelligence, which is mostly inherited. Parents are educated, etc. That's true to some extent. I'm also very average-looking, short. There's nothing really exceptional with my physical appearance. Terribly unathletic. I have flat feet that cause me pain after 2 hours of walking. I tried various insoles. Nothing seems to work. So my feet, and actually the podiatrist told me I have some of the worst flat feet he's ever seen. So I don't just have advantages. I also have disadvantages, like we all do. I'm not going to say advocate that I deserve an operation, some sort of massive operation to permanently fix my feet. I haven't investigated, but I'm sure that there are. Just like these women say, well, I want to have sex and have a baby and be paid for it for 18 weeks. I don't think so. This is, I think, the crux of the issue here, is that as a society, as a civilization, we've grown accustomed to this notion of fairness, which is pie in the sky, as I said in the beginning. It's a pure fantasy, and we try to propagate it, and we try to apply it to our institutions, educational, political, social, everything. If we spent less time complaining and less time claiming we can make life fair, I think overall, as a civilization, we'd be just a lot more productive. So, I really hope that they the universities change their policy on this. If Asian Americans are the best students, the best qualified, the smartest, then those universities should be majority Asian Americans. There's no question in my mind about that. If the white and black people fall behind there, well, so what? They can do other stuff. And for the individuals who belong to a different ethnicity, if they are then far outside the mean, say to the right, then they should be admitted as well. So this isn't per se about race. It's just about averages and means and outcomes, and that's just the way it is. So there's that as well in our pie in the sky, or say no to pie in the sky campaign. But lords and ladies, it gets even wackier than this. I bet you didn't know that Wikipedia, that famous online encyclopedia, was actually an institution of white male privilege. Apparently it is. So let's have a listen to this nice gentleman telling us the truth about Wikipedia.
There is systemic bias, quite a lot of it. Western white bias, male bias. About 90% of the editors on Wikipedia are male. So that's a problem right there that we need to fix.
Well, I bet you didn't know that. This is a problem we need to fix, ladies and gentlemen, lords, white privileged shitlords. Apparently, you're part of this problem as well. You're part of so many problems, but the reason why Wikipedia sucks is because, well, most of the contributors apparently, according to the claims of this guy, link in the low bar, are male and white, and that's a problem that needs to be fixed. Now, if you watch the video, which is published on Al Jazeera television, no surprise there, you'll see some other stuff. Part of the claim is that there's too much material published in English. Well, there's a reason for that. English, for better or worse, happens to be the lingua franca of the world, which is to say, it's the language of communication. In sheer numbers, it is outclassed by various Chinese languages. I won't say dialects because they're sufficiently different. But in terms of the language of communication, it is absolutely English. From Argentina to Southeast Asia to anywhere, it happens to be English. Now, there is a large native Anglo-Saxon population, but they're just simple reasons why most of the stuff is in English. Because if English is the lingua franca, that also means that communicating is easier. Because, say, if you publish something in Portuguese, you're going to have fewer readers, and publishing something in English is going to be just much more accessible. It's as simple as that. So there are differences in the numbers. I think German actually has the second largest number of articles. But the other thing is, as is pointed out in this mini documentary they have, Wikipedia is not corporately funded. It's funded by people like you or me. So things go up and they just go up. Now, one thing I found really curious is, I don't know, they never cite demographics. The guy just makes the claim that 90% of the contributors are white privileged males or something like that. I don't know where he's getting that from. It sounds really suspicious to me. Where's the evidence? As far as I know, when you sign up to contribute to a Wikipedia article, it is largely anonymous. You certainly don't need to indicate your sex or your racial profile. I don't think so, at least. But, I mean, who knows? So this is actually of concern. Because, as we know, social justice warriors, everything they touch, they pollute, they putrefy, they turn to mush, they turn anyone who's involved in social justice, the far left, these lunatics, everything they touch, they turn to just putrid, rotting meat, basically, of no value. This happened in the case, obviously, as all you know, in the case of Atheism Plus. This happened in terms of, I think it was Internet Aristocrat who pointed this out in the demonstrations after the economic crash of 2008 and Take Back Wall Street or whatever. You get lunatics on board and they just corrupt everything. Now, fortunately for us, it's not perfect, but Wikipedia is, generally speaking, a pretty good source of information. Yes, there's misinformation there. I've seen it myself regarding certain things I happen to know about. It's not perfect. But it's free for most of us, and I have contributed on occasion economically to the continued existence of Wikipedia, and it is massive, as is also pointed out in this video. It is just massive. There's never been a better source, for all its flaws, for knowledge and understanding than Wikipedia. It's not perfect, but it is still the best thing we've had in the history of humanity, I would argue. Now, that suggestion that the man made that it somehow needs to be fixed because of alleged... First off, he doesn't offer evidence, as I said before, but the direction that's pushing things in, that's kind of scary, because if we let social justice warriors in as some sort of, directing powers that be to Wikipedia, everything will turn to fucking shit. Has anyone of you actually checked out Rational Wiki? I mean, yeah, the title sounds like, oh, this is a Wikipedia about science and reason. No, it's just, third wave feminism, social justice, and a lot of anti-male bullshit for the most part. Not much basis in science or fact. I think I'm going to do more investigation on this in the future, but if this is what was cited, it is very disturbing. So let's hope that Wikipedia is not infected by these disgusting people who are quite literally a blight upon civilization. I have no reservations in saying that. The deniers of reality, the people who push for pie in the sky, they are a blight on civilization. Everything they touch, they ruin. And I'm a bit worried now, having done a little bit of research on this, that they too might ruin the glorious yet imperfect Wikipedia. We don't want this. Now, I'm under no illusion that anything I said will have any impact on anything, but it nonetheless is something that needs to be said. Gentleman asked, why do you talk about these things? You should just talk about, I don't know, marriage and how women suck. But to me, reality is the most important thing, and that's ultimately what MGTOW is about, recognizing the reality of gender relations, for example. A lot of people avoid that. I don't. I'd also like to recognize and acknowledge and internalize the reality of the fact that people are different, that people are racially different, that this can contribute to different outcomes and different opportunities, and so on and so forth. And I also want to be acutely aware of the danger of social justice warriors touching things and making them basically broken and turning them to shit. We really need to be aware of this. So these are my thoughts. I will continue to offer commentary, God's willing, if I'm alive and not homeless, in the future on related subjects and on the subject of what's going on in Europe. As a final note, people ask, why are you talking about this? I live in Europe. I'm as much European as I am American. And I have a vested interest intellectually in some of the ideas of Europe, freedom of speech, certain Enlightenment values, which in some cases turned out to be wrong because of certain scientific discoveries. But nonetheless, the idea of a secular society, the idea that you should be able to say whatever you want. That's not perfect in Europe. For example, some countries have hate speech laws. I'm vehemently opposed to those. I was very pleased earlier this year when Mein Kampf, the book by Hitler, was made accessible in Germany. Not because I think it's a great work of literature, but because it's it's freedom of expression. I'm against these hate speech laws that Germany and France has. It's ridiculous, but that's a different story. My point is that there's certain values, particularly Western European values, that I think are very important, that have led to great things, and I want to see them continue. And so when I talk about certain problems, such as incompatibilities between certain religions, such as Islam and Western values in the sense of Enlightenment values, freedom of expression, well, that's an important thing. Those of you in the United States, you're in a different situation. But if you're here in Europe, I think you'll notice that things are a lot more tense, and I think we're a lot closer to teetering over and into something quite destructive and negative. Anyway, that's all I have to say. As always, thanks for listening. Enjoy your weekend. And may your chosen deity watch over you. Bye-bye. And don't forget, say no to pie in the sky.